Ukrainian President Zelensky arrived in Rome on Thursday as part of a European tour aimed at securing more military and financial support from Western countries as US aid hangs in balance ahead of the next presidential election in November. As we know, Ukraine faces its toughest winter since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022. Zelensky has had a full schedule in Europe. Early on Thursday, he met with British Prime Minister Starmer and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in London. He outlined what has been described as his victory plan to defeat Russian forces. The plan was expected to be presented at a meeting in Germany this week, but the meeting was later postponed after US President Joe Biden had to cancel his visit. But the plan has been pretty much at the center of Zelensky's discussions in European capitals. Later the same day, Zelensky traveled to Paris, where he met with French President Emmanuel Macron, who reaffirmed France's commitment to support Ukraine. On Thursday evening, Zelensky arrived here in the Italian capital at around 9 p.m. He met with Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The two held a bilateral meeting and later joined a press conference during which Meloni reiterated Italy's support for Ukraine, both in the military and in the energy sectors. Zelensky confirmed that he introduced his plan to Giorgia Meloni as well. As part of the plan, we know that Zelensky is seeking approval to use long-range weapons deep inside Russia. This has been a controversial topic among countries supporting Ukraine. We know that Italy's government has been opposing the use of Italian weapons in Russia. On Friday, Zelensky is scheduled to have an audience with Pope Francis in the Vatican, and later the same day he's traveling to Germany to meet with German Chancellor Scholz. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
The European Union has given the green light to a loan of 35 billion euros to Ukraine. It will be gradually repaid through interest from frozen Russian assets. These Russian foreign reserves amount to approximately 270 billion euros, of which 210 billion are in the EU. The exceptional profits generated are estimated to yield between 2.5 and 3 billion euros per year. An initial agreement reached in June provided for the G7 to collectively provide 45 billion to Kyiv by the end of the year. In the end, the EU had to put more money on the table because Washington conditioned its participation on an extension of the EU sanctions against Moscow.
There is a risk that at some point sanctions against Russian assets will not be extended, because for extension there should be unanimity voting for this, and so the future flows of revenues from Russian assets can be disrupted.
These sanctions are voted on every 6 months unanimously, but the EU now would like to renew them only every 3 years for more stability. The US is concerned that a member state blocking these sanctions would sabotage the plan. Hungary has already declared that it will hold back any decision on changes in the sanctions regime until after the US presidential elections.
The United States, for example, might be considering a supplemental towards the second half of the year after the elections, but there is no guarantee that that might move forward. There's a lot of hesitancy. In particular, if Donald Trump were to win the election, what might his plans be for both aid as well as for moving towards a ceasefire?
Kyiv will be free to decide how these funds are used. The ball is now in the court of the European Parliament, which must give its consent to the 35 billion euro loan.
The French government unveiled its draft budget plan for 2025 in Paris on Thursday, and it's quite a touchy subject considering that France's public deficit is expected to reach more than 6% of its GDP by the end of the year. That's higher than almost all other EU countries, and the government's goal is to slash 60 billion euros in 2025 alone. That's 2% of its GDP. It's quite an unprecedented amount, and to do this, the Minister of the Economy economy, Antoine Armand, announced an eye-watering 40 billion euros in public spending cuts that will cover pretty much all ministries. So it's quite an unpopular measure among his own government. And local territories will also be asked to cut more than 5 billion euros, which has caused quite an uproar among France's mayors. And the rest of the 20 billion euros will come through exceptional and temporary tax hikes that will concern the wealthiest incomes and also the highest earning corporations. And the budget plan will also face intense scrutiny from the EU Commission that formally warned France back in June of its excessive public spending. And although the government claimed it's open to debate, well, the current fragmented political landscape could push Prime Minister Michel Barnier to adopt the text without a vote using the controversial Article 49.3 of the French Constitution. Sofia Katzenkova reporting from Paris for Euronews.
Addressing issues related to family and demography will be at the center of the upcoming European Congress on Family, organized by the ECR party in Croatia. In a briefing held in Rome, the party's Secretary General Antonio Giordano, alongside representatives of Brothers of Italy, explained the focus of the event and why these topics are central to the Conservatives' political agenda.
Un tema è sicuramente il punto di vista valoriale, sul quale i conservatori hanno un'idea molto chiara. Grande apertura a tutti i tipi di diritti, ma con la famiglia al centro. Poi ci sono le sfide economiche che le famiglie affrontano e quindi questo verrà ragionato con degli economisti. Poi ci sono le sfide tecnologiche, perché non dimentichiamoci che oggi uno degli elementi di crisi della famiglia è l'abbandono del dialogo a favore del social media.
A total of 300 delegates from around the world will attend the event, among them representatives from various right-wing forces. The ECR's party mission is to strengthen ties among conservatives around shared values, acting as a mediator among different parties.
Quando si parla di famiglia si riunisce tutto e quindi avremo membri del Partito Popolare, avremo membri dei Patrioti, ovviamente la maggioranza dei membri sarà del Partito Conservatore Europeo. In generale il progetto di ECR è quello di essere il centro del dialogo, quindi il punto di raccordo dove si possa parlare alla nostra destra e alla nostra sinistra e nel futuro io spero di andare ancora più a sinistra.
Family and the fight against the demographic crisis gripping Europe have long been central to the ECR and FDI's political agenda.
In Italia indubbiamente abbiamo dei numeri preoccupanti che devono essere posti all'attenzione e al centro dell'agenda politica del governo, cosa che in realtà il governo Meloni ha già fatto con una serie di stanziamenti.
Giorgia Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
Hundreds of students in Budapest have been taught how to protect themselves against online fraud at a Cyberfest event organised by the police. Secret Service officers showed young people how to be aware of the risks posed by hackers and some influencers.
23 iskola, 34 osztálya, közel 1000 diáknak van lehetősége mai nap részt venni a programjainkon, és hát az a célunk, hogy élményközpontú programokat kínáljunk, és nem titkolt célunk az az, hogy úgy szerezzenek ismeretet a hallgatók, diákok, hogy esetleg nem is tudják, hogy éppen ők tanulnak, és új ismereteket visznek haza.
In the National Cybersecurity Institute's area, one of the main lessons was that if you connect to public Wi-Fi networks, your data can easily be stolen with a device that anyone can legally buy.
Vannak olyan eszközök, amelyek egyszerűen tudnak megtévesztő hálózatokat kialakítani, és pont ezért ezek az eszközökkel minden olyan forgalom, ami azon átment, azok megfigyelhetőek, lehallgathatóak, ezért óvaintenék mindenkit, hogy ilyen ingyenes hálózatokhoz akár hozzácsatlakozzon.
Although the tasks were mostly playful, the dangers of cybercrime are very real and young people aren't the only targets.
A csalók 2 évvel ezelőtt 9 milliárd forintot, tavaly pedig már 23 milliárd forintot loptak el a magyar emberektől az interneten keresztül a Nemzeti Bank statisztikái szerint. Ez azt jelenti, hogy most már gyakorlatilag mindenki veszélyben van, és ezért jó, hogyha megtanulja, hogyan védekezhet az internetes csalások ellen. Magyar Ádám, Euronews, Budapest.
Representatives of the Greek tourism sector are not concerned for over-tourism, but do believe mass tourism during peak periods could lead to overconcentration. They say popular tourist destinations need to be regulated in a way that protects the environment, local communities, and the tourists themselves. The shipwreck on Navaggio Beach is an example of such a destination, attracting 1.5 million visitors annually.
Η βιωσιμότητα των εξαιρετικά δημοφιλών τουριστικών προορισμών είναι μια δύσκολη άσκηση και ένα από τα πιο χαρακτηριστικά παραδείγματα είναι η παραλία που βρίσκεται πίσω μου, το περίφημο ναυάγιο της Ζακίνθου. Έκλεισε πριν από 3 χρόνια. Τώρα οι ελληνικές αρχές προσπαθούν να βρουν τρόπους για να προστατεύσουν και το ναυάγιο και την παραλία.
Tour operators could promote alternative destinations, but such efforts would require additional accommodation and public infrastructure.
It's very important to contribute to the development of the smaller destinations in order to balance the, let's say, uneven growth and development of tourism. Well, it takes, first of all, more risks from our side, and it's more challenging because of the smaller accommodation base, and also it requires the infrastructure to follow up.
To increase sustainability, Greek hoteliers introduced the Greek Breakfast Initiative, offering locally sourced products.
Επειδή τα προϊόντα αυτά παράγονται στον τόπο, από τη μία ενισχύουμε το εισόδημα της κοινωνίας, από την άλλη ενισχύουμε και τη βιωσιμότητα, γιατί παράγονται βέβαια με κανόνες βιωσιμότητας, τα περισσότερα είναι και οργανικά από αυτά.
2024 is expected to be another record year for Greece. 35 million tourists are expected to have visited by the end of this year, almost 3 times the number of the country's own residents.